What to do with Jihaad Campbell and Nakobe Dean at linebacker. We'll get into it on today's edition of Locked On Eagles.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome in, Eagles fans, to this Thursday edition of the show. I'm your host, Louie DiBiase, and we're brought to you by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL. You're going to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. The Eagles have a good problem on their hands, but it is still not a problem, but something that they need to figure out. And it's what to do for the remainder of the 2025 season at the linebacker position. We know Zack Baun is going to be playing every single down. He is one of the top three players, one of the top three pillars, I always say, of this defense. It's Jalen Carter on the defensive line. It's Zack Baun at linebacker. It's Quinyon Mitchell in the secondary. But next to him, Jihaad Campbell and Nakobe Dean are both very good players. Both have different strengths, but still equally strong players in the NFL. And so now that Dean is back healthy, Jihaad Campbell is a Rookie of the Year favorite on the defensive side of the football. And you add in the fact that the Eagles are getting healthier on the edge, so you can no longer kind of use that as a crutch by saying, oh, Jihaad Campbell's playing on the edge and Dean's playing on the inside because we need bodies on the outside. Now that Brandon Graham is coming back after the bye, now that Nolan Smith is likely to be activated from injured reserve after the bye to return against the Green Bay Packers on Monday Night Football, now Vic Fangio has a real decision to make. Like, okay, you were kind of able to just use injuries as an excuse to play both guys in different roles, but now that you're not going to really need Jihaad Campbell on the edge, what are you going to do? I think we know in the future that Jihaad Campbell is the long-term answer at inside linebacker next to Zack Baun. You know, of course, he's a first-round pick that has 5 years of team control on his contract, whereas Nakobe Dean is an unrestricted free agent next year. They already paid a linebacker a top 5 contract with Zack Baun and just spent a first-round pick in this position. So I doubt they turn around and pay Nakobe Dean in an unrestricted pool next offseason. So we know the long-term answer is kind of already solved. But for this year, what do you do now? Like, how do you split those reps between Nakobe Dean and Jihaad Campbell? Because both are going to play. I don't think it's a clear and obvious black and white kind of decision where it's Campbell or it's Dean, and the other guy you should really focus on special teams and you're barely going to play any defensive snaps. Like, I don't think that's going to happen. Campbell and Dean are both too good to leave off the field. And again, the good thing is they both do things really well that maybe the other doesn't. I don't want to say Jihaad Campbell's not great against the run, but Nakobe Dean, I think, is one of the best run defenders at the linebacker position in all of the NFL. He's one of the best tacklers and players coming downhill. He's a great blitzer, too, that the NFL has to offer at this position. Jihaad Campbell, also a very good pass rusher, a versatile player that has inside-out versatility, but is also the best coverage linebacker statistically right now in all of the NFL. So I do think there's a role for both. There's a place for both on defense where in obvious short yardage situations, Nakobe Dean is out there when you know they're running the football in the red zone on early downs. I think in base packages, you can have Nakobe Dean and Jihaad Campbell on the field at the same time. But I do think somebody has to outsnap the other. Somebody has to be the featured player. And to me personally, because of the long term, that should be Jihaad Campbell. But not just because of that. Campbell was playing at such a high level before Dean came back that it's not like you're only playing Campbell because of the future at the expense of the now. Jihaad Campbell, like I said, statistically has been the most efficient coverage linebacker in all of football when it comes to the fewest yards of separation allowed when he's covering opposing receivers, tight ends, and running backs. And Campbell also was somebody that got timely turnovers in really close games, like that forced fumble against the Dallas Cowboys. In a close game in the second half against Tampa Bay, he has a forced fumble in the third quarter and an interception in the red zone that probably, you can argue, won them the football game. So Campbell has been a playmaker getting turnovers. He's been an elite coverage linebacker. And it's not like he's been bad against the run. I actually think he's been really good getting through the muck of the offensive and defensive line, tracking the football, and finishing tackles. Like, yeah, Nakobe Dean is on another level and has really improved the Eagles' run defense. But for me, personally, I do think that Jihaad Campbell should be the featured player over Nakobe Dean. The snap count is not going to be 80-20 in favor of one of these players over the other. But if there is one featured guy next to Bond that you're game planning for to be the main part of the defense in all different schemes, like in all situations, he's the guy that doesn't leave the field when there's two linebackers out there. I personally want that to be Campbell. It'll be really interesting to see what happens, though, after the bye, because when you look at that Giants game, in the second half, even when the Giants you knew had to throw the football, and still a game that wasn't out of reach. At one point, it's an 11-point game? Guess what? Jihaad Campbell came off the field and Nakobe Dean was out there. Fangio was allowed to point to the fact that Campbell was learning the edge rusher position. They needed him there to focus on that, and they didn't want to put too much on his plate because he was struggling to pick up the edge position, so they wanted him to focus solely on that. But what happens now when Brandon Graham does come back? What happens when Nolan Smith is back on top of having Josh Uche and Jalix Hunt? And suddenly you don't really need Jihaad to play on the edge. Now what do? I think there will still be times they use that package with Campbell as an overhang outside linebacker and Nakobe Dean in the inside. Like, I do like that. I like their base package of having those two and Bond out there together. But the majority of the time in Fangio's defense, they're going to have at least 3 to 4 defensive backs. They're going to have 4 other defensive linemen out there. And you're going to have 2 inside linebackers. One of them is always going to be Zach Bond. So what do? Again, I personally think that although Nakobe Dean is very valuable to this team, both on and off the field, they do need to feature Campbell moving forward. I mean, you look at the odds for Defensive Rookie of the Year, you look at a lot of the, halfway point, all rookie teams, like Campbell is consistently, he's a top 2 rookie in football so far. I mean, who else has there been? Like, on offense, it's, clearly Jackson Dart's been really impressive, and Cam Scadaboo before he got injured on Sunday. You look at 2 on the other side of the football. A lot of them are actually Giants. A lot of them are in the NFC East. It's Abdul Carter. And I think, Jihaad Campbell's been one of the best rookies, if not the best, in all of football this year. So that's a really interesting, we were talking on our Locked On Eagles squad show today. Make sure you check out that hour special on YouTube or wherever you get our audio shows. We were talking about, what do you want to see moving forward the rest of the season? What answers do you want to get? What do you want to see more of? What questions do you have? And outside of course, the elephant in the room of the A.J. Brown drama, will that continue, or will he finally be happy moving forward? The on-the-field question that I want answered really is what they're going to do with this position. It's a good problem to have, though. I mean, this is the first time in a long time the Eagles are we have too many good linebackers. What do we do with all these guys? Zach Bond, Jihaad Campbell, Nakobe Dean, Jeremiah Trotter Jr., you can make the argument, is the best 4th inside linebacker in all of football. And I'm really excited about their 5th guy, in Smile Mondon. I think he has some really intriguing athletic traits, some really impressive speed and coverage ability, that there's 5 young players at this position that I think could really play if Fangio needed them to. So that's going to be interesting moving forward. Let me know what you think. Campbell or Dean? Hit us up on X at LockedOnBirds, at DiBiase, LOE. Coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles, we know yesterday the Eagles did make a trade for Jets slot cornerback Michael Carter II, Michael Carter Jr. If the Eagles did make another trade before the deadline on November 4th, it would likely be for a pass rusher. Do they have enough there, or should Howie Roseman make a move? We'll get into it coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by PrizePicks. You and I make decisions every day, but on PrizePicks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement of this sports season, whether you're following the NFL, the NBA, or both. There's no better time to jump in on the action, and if you've tried it, PrizePicks is, you'll see, the simplest way to play. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player stats, and if you get them right, you win. It takes less than 60 seconds to make your lineup, and you can play anywhere PrizePicks operates, including California, Texas, and Georgia. I've been using PrizePicks during football Sundays and NBA tip-off. It keeps every game exciting. They have new stacks as well, which is a game changer. You can now pick more on, like, let's say Steph Curry's points, three-pointers, and assists in the same lineup. Plus, if one of your players leaves early with an injury, I love this. There is an injury reboot that saves your lineup from a loss. So download the PrizePicks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. Guys, today's show is also sponsored by Monarch. Let's be honest, most of us can't even name all our financial accounts, let alone what they're worth between 401ks, savings, and investments. It's easy to lose track, and that can mean leaving money on the table. That's why I started using Monarch, an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. It's helped me organize my accounts, track my spending, and get a much better handle on my investments without having to touch a spreadsheet. I love that you can review everything from your partner, see the shared goals, and make better financial decisions together. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL at monarch.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarch.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Thanks as always for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. The NFL trade deadline is next week. The Eagles made the move I feel like they had to before the deadline, before the 2025 playoff run. To me, they had to bring in another cornerback. As much as I was high on, and you guys know it, I didn't stop talking about him this year. I was very high on Kelee Ringo, as was Howie Roseman. They let Darius Slay walk because of Ringo. They kind of lowballed Isaiah Rodgers in free agency and let him go to Minnesota because of Kelee Ringo and their belief in his ceiling. He has had some good moments this year. I thought he had a good game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I thought he was solid against the Denver Broncos. Then he was egregiously bad against the New York Giants and definitely showed his liabilities that will probably creep back up when games really matter down the stretch. Adoree Jackson, to me, has had a couple good moments, but I think overall has been atrocious this year. And then Jacorian Bennett, just have no idea what you have in him still. Did not really love what I saw the first couple weeks of the season. So if there was one kind of crutch this team had that could have really hurt them in a playoff run, it was definitely that third cornerback spot. Bringing in Michael Carter from the Jets. Now, it doesn't completely solve that, but Carter is a much better player, in my opinion, than those other three. He has a much higher floor. And like I said on the show yesterday, bringing Carter into the slot, potentially, and Cooper DeJean playing on the outside is just a much safer bet to not be a disaster than Cooper DeJean, as good as he is in the slot, having those ticking time bombs on the outside in Ringo, Bennett, and Jackson. None of them were going to play consistent enough this year to where Fangio would be able to just commit to one of them. So they made the move they had to make before the deadline. Now, if they were to make another move, what would it be for? I think it would definitely be for a pass rusher. And look, I'm not going to stick my nose up at them adding another player there. Like, if they bring in Trey Hendrickson, and I think the Cincinnati Bengals would be nuts to not deal this guy at this point. He's a UFA next year. After that Jets loss, you're not out of the playoffs, but you really needed that one to be in good shape to get Joe Burrow back healthy for a stretch run in December. After losing that game, if I'm the Bengals, I would sell. The Bengals do business really weird, though, so we'll see. But if they were able to add like a Trey Hendrickson, or God forbid, I saw that report today that the Eagles are hot on the trail of Myles Garrett. Like, if they were able to pull off a blockbuster move like that, or for Max Crosby, or they bring in Bradley Chubb from the Miami Dolphins, like, I'm cool with that. You can never have enough pass rushers. And Brandon Graham being that fourth guy doesn't, in my opinion, stop you from bringing in somebody else. BG is that fifth player that really doesn't play all that much, but is a great locker room guy, and in case of injury is there in case of emergency, break the glass. Like, having BG in that locker room, I think that's a great thing to have, but it shouldn't preclude you from making more moves. So again, I'm always in on Howie Roseman being aggressive and going after players that can affect the quarterback. Again, that's a very smart business move the majority of the time. But I personally do not believe they need another edge rusher. Like, I kind of think they're good. Jalix Hunt has been getting better and better every week. He's been the best defensive player on the field in the last 2 wins. Nolan Smith is returning from injured reserve after the bye week. I think he's an elite football player. Brandon Graham is on retiring, and I think he can be who he was last year as a really solid 4th guy, as a veteran in that rotation. Josh Uche has been, in my opinion, extremely underrated so far through 8 games this season. I'm feeling pretty good about it. For you, I think if you're not, whether you believe the Eagles need a pass rusher or not, really depends on how you feel about Jalix Hunt, in my opinion. If you believe Jalix Hunt is breaking out like Nolan Smith did last year and can become a star, top 2 player in an edge rotation in the NFL this year, then you probably don't need another guy. You probably don't believe Howie Roseman has to do something else before the trade deadline. If you believe that Jalix still is more of a fastball, young developing player that's more of a 3rd or 4th guy in a rotation, if you believe that the leap he makes is more probably in year 3 in 2026, then you probably do want to go out there and add another player. To me, another pass rusher. That's the big question I think you need to ask. What the Eagles need to ask is, how much do you believe in Jalix Hunt for the rest of this season? Because the Eagles won a Super Bowl last year, when you think about it, with an elite interior pass rush, which you already have this year, again, with Jalen Carter, Moro Ijoma, and Jordan Davis. So you already have that like you did last year. And last season, you had a 3-man edge rotation of Nolan Smith, Josh Sweat, and a rookie Jalix Hunt. Brandon Graham was injured up until the Super Bowl. I think you know that when Nolan Smith comes back, he's going to be just as good, if not better, than 2024 Nolan Smith. So you still have that piece of the 3-man rotation that won you a Super Bowl last year. Jalix Hunt was a really good 3rd guy, a fastball off the edge, a young player, high motor athlete that was getting to the quarterback. He got hot at the right time, saved his best ball for the playoffs, especially in the Super Bowl and in the NFC Championship, but he was also great in that Rams divisional round game as well. You have that, I think, in my opinion, in Josh Uche. Uche is a very good 3rd player on the edge. I think he is a similar tier player to what you had out of Jalix Hunt at the end of 2024. So I think you still have 2/3 of what you had last year on the edge. The question is, do you think Jalix Hunt can be who Josh Sweat was down the stretch? I personally do think he can be that guy, if not better. Josh Sweat could have been Super Bowl MVP against the Chiefs. So, yeah. And Sweat is dominating this year, by the way, with the Arizona Cardinals. He's had a really good season, which definitely makes you wish he was still in Philadelphia. But when you look at the majority of Josh Sweat's season last year outside of the Super Bowl, he led the Eagles in sacks, but he was kind of an up-and-down player. He had a lot of, hot and cold moments, was pretty steady, but didn't dominate like Hassan Reddick did in 2022, week in and week out. Jalix Hunt has already had a couple games this year that were better than the majority of Josh Sweat games in 2024. So I believe that Jalix Hunt can be your Josh Sweat, your number 2 to Nolan Smith moving forward. If you don't believe that he can be that number 2 guy and he's better off as a 3 and Josh Uche's better off as a 4, then you probably want somebody. I personally believe Jalix can be a 2, Nolan is a 1, and Uche is a 3. And oh, by the way, this year, we'll see unless he got hurt, knock on wood, but Brandon Graham you do have as your 4th guy, and even Azeez Ojulari as a pretty experienced 5th guy that has made plays this year when he was out there before getting a hamstring injury. Those are 5 players. You're deeper this year on the edge than I think you were last year because Brandon Graham did go down. So that's how I feel about the position heading into trade deadline week. I don't think they need to do anything. Jalix Hunt is getting better and better. He's been the best defensive player over the last 2 games, a pick 6, a sack. He leads the Eagles in pressures on the edge with 28. Josh Uche's had 20. He's been doing really well. He should have 2 strip sacks, in my opinion, over the last 2 games. He's been one of the more consistent players on the Eagles defense against the run as well. So with those 2 and Nolan Smith coming back and how good he was playing before his injury, and he wasn't even at 100%. When he was injured, he was kind of playing with one healthy arm. I'm feeling good about it. And Brandon Graham coming back. So I'm not going to stick my nose up at a Trey Hendrickson type of trade. But if they don't make a move and cornerback was all they acquired before the deadline, that's what I wanted anyway, and I'm pretty happy with it. So let me know what you think. Hit us up on our YouTube community page, guys. We're always posting Eagles content on there as well, on top of our X account and TikTok at Locked On Eagles. We'll wrap up the show coming up next. One good thing about the Eagles' struggles or the ups and downs of 2025 so far, I think you should feel a lot better about their depth than maybe you did on paper heading into the season. I'll tell you why coming up right here on Locked On Eagles. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride with more IIHS Top Safety Plus pick awards than anybody else as of August 2025. From footwork to breathwork, athletes sweat all the details. Mazda brings the same intention to how they craft every model. You can feel Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, with the metallic accents to available Napa leather upholstery. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but. From smooth handling to intuitive controls, with all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV. You can drive with confidence through almost any season. Like players, Mazda sweats every detail because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. All right, guys, we're wrapping up this Thursday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day. Make sure your second listen is the Locked On NFL podcast, 2 episodes a week, Monday through Friday. My guy, Tyler, the Madman Roland, gets you a shot of football espresso in the morning. Tony, the barber, Tony Wiggins, gets you into the barber shop, talking some ball during the afternoons. 2 episodes a week, Monday through Friday, wherever you get your podcasts. One thing I will say about the Eagles' kind of roller coaster ride to a 6-2 start so far this year is they've had to overcome a lot of adversity, which I think is good to go through during a season. I think it only strengthens you outside of 2023 when it made you collapse. Normally, with the Eagles at least, in different regimes too, like 2017, 2018, 2019, 2021, 23 for a bit before the collapse, 2024, now 2025. Adversity has normally allowed them to strengthen as a team and get better as the year goes on and get ready for a playoff run. And what they've had to deal with this year that they really didn't last year or even in 2022, that they've had to overcome and have, and we've been able to answer some questions about the depth of this team, is injuries. I will say, heading into the regular season, I was a little bit concerned about how this team looked on paper from a depth perspective. Now, I still thought they had the best, most complete starting lineup in the entire NFL heading into the year. But the hardest thing to do after a Super Bowl season is replenish your depth, is maintain having one of the deeper rosters in all of the NFL. You have to be really good at drafting, which Howie Roseman has been the best drafter in the NFL over the last 5 years. You also have to really nail those like bargain bin free agent signings. You have to be really creative with how you bring in talent to replenish that roster when role players go sign bags with other teams. Even like with coaches too, they go out there and get better jobs. Like the depth of your overall organization takes a big hit after a Super Bowl run because everybody in the NFL wants a little bit of that recipe for themselves. But I will say, despite it not looking great on paper heading into the year, when we've seen it on the field, I feel pretty good that if there are injuries down the stretch, and that's just a part of life in the NFL, the Eagles do have the role players to be okay for a little bit. Now, any team that loses too many players long-term on your starting lineup, you're probably not going to win a championship. Health is the number one reason most of the time a team wins a title over anything. There's a lot that goes into it, but health really is number one. You've looked at the offense dealing with a lot of injuries on the offensive line. Fred Johnson has played really well in place of Lane Johnson. He's playing as that 6th offensive lineman right now, and it's really helped change the Eagles' offense playing under center. Brett Toth has had to come in for Cam Jurgens and had a top 5 overall grade against the Giants last week. Toth was really instrumental in turning things around for the Eagles' run game, the outside zone concepts on the outside. I thought he really blocked well in the open field. I thought he did a really good job taking on Dexter Lawrence in pass protection. Tank Bigsby is suddenly the best second running back, the most complete second running back that you've had since, I said on the squad show today, probably when you had Jordan Howard as your Robin to Miles Sanders as Batman in 2019, before he went down and it was Boston Scott. Like, when you think about it, Tank is the most complete running back you've had since then, because outside of, again, Jordan Howard, moving forward after that, behind your bell cow, you've always had these smaller receiving backs, Boston Scott, Corey Clement, Kenny Gainwell, Will Shipley, like those guys, Darren Sproles, even back in the day. Like, if your running back goes down, those guys can't carry a backfield. Now, knowing you have Tank Bigsby in the backfield, if Saquon Barkley goes down, I think they can be okay. Obviously, they're going to have a drop-off, but if you had to rely on Will Shipley and A.J. Dillon to be the 1-2 punch if Saquon went down, like, I don't think that's good enough in the backfield. Jahan Dotson at wide receiver 3, all this guy does over the last 2 years is make plays when his number is called, whether it's in a regular season game, the first round of the playoffs, the Super Bowl. Dotson has made plays when his number is called. This year, his number has been called, like 3 or 4 times? In 3 or 4 of those targets, look what's happened. He had a 50-yard bomb in the season opener against the Cowboys to open up the offense. And then this past week, he had the dagger 40-yard moss of a touchdown over the New York Giants. Dotson, if, Brown or Smith went down again, it's not like you have Quez Watkins anymore, or an old man Julio Jones that has to fill in the blanks, or an Olamide Zaccheaus. Jahan Dotson is a substantial upgrade over those players. Even on the offensive line with their starting lineup, like Tyler Steen is, you could say, your worst starter or the least talented starter, and he's had a really underrated, strong season so far. On defense, Nakobe Dean, a linebacker, makes them, like I said earlier on the show, the deepest linebacking core in the entire NFL. Michael Carter being added to cornerback now gives them pretty good corner depth, where I don't think that was the one position that, with one injury, and we saw it against the Giants on Thursday night when Quinyon Mitchell went down, you could be screwed. Now, with Carter in the mix, I don't think you'd be completely screwed if, God forbid, Quinyon Mitchell or Cooper DeJean did get injured. BG and Nolan Smith coming back on the edge. Depth, again, it's always the hardest thing to maintain after a Super Bowl, but I'm starting to really like what the Eagles look like on paper from top to bottom. And yeah, Howie Roseman has had some misses this year. That's just, I think, natural with this kind of offseason. But it hasn't been a 2023-like year where you're looking around the roster and you're like, man, Howie didn't replace anybody that he lost from Super Bowl 57. I think he's done a pretty good job at replacing a lot of his depth. Of course, coaching goes into that too. I think the development and the coaching of the staff does not get enough credit for all the contributions they get from young players on both sides of the ball that always seem like they're ready to go. A lot of that is coaching as well. But I think that's one thing I have answered with the 6-2 start, is that the Eagles' depth is a lot better than we think it is. Most of that, though, is great coaching and great drafting. So Howie Roseman, Nick Sirianni, the assistant coaching staff, the scouts, they all deserve a lot of credit for that, because that is not easy to do. We saw that in 2018 and 2019. We saw that in 2023. That hasn't really been the case in 2025 so far. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day. Until tomorrow, as always, thanks so much for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly.